The projector made a low, grinding hum, like a microphone that didn't want to speak. It bounced light off a glossy farewell slide, freezing my husband's face in that grainy corporate blue. Around us, the reception room smelled like old carnations and overcooked cocktail shrimp. Folding chairs squeaked under shifting legs. And at the front of the room, his secretary stood in nude heels and a navy sheath dress, unfolding a crisp sheet of printer paper like she was unveiling a final act. She smiled, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and then she started reading. "Dear friends and colleagues," she said, soft and rehearsed, "I want to thank you for the years of laughter, trust, and hard work." The room listened. I listened. I waited for my name. 5 years ago, at the same company, they toasted us both when we announced our engagement. The same VP had raised a glass. The same HR manager had ordered the mini cannoli. My name had been on that cake. To Ron and Emily, power couple of the year. But this time, nothing. Her voice kept going, even when I stopped hearing it. She mentioned his mentor, his golf buddy, his niece, Claire, even his dog, Buster. But not me. Not once. Not even in the perfunctory "and my family" section that polite men include, even when they don't mean it. The words ended with a round of light applause, some sniffling from HR, and my husband rising to hug her, one arm around her waist. Quick, professional, but not nothing. The room clapped louder. I didn't. I just reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and took a photo. Program, podium, letter, faces, not for social media, for evidence. My name is Emily. I'm 42 years old, and this is how I turned his quiet erasure into a revelation he couldn't bury. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. He didn't even look my way when he stepped down. Just went straight to the VP, then to a group of younger engineers with red cups and Spotify playlists on loop. I stood by the punch bowl, fingers cold around the glass, watching his back while the slideshow behind him changed photos without sound. There he was in Austin, smiling in a kayak. There he was holding a foam finger at a Yankees game. There he was in front of our old backyard grill. Only my hand had been cropped out, I noticed. Slide after slide, I started to see it. Not just absence, curation. The quiet art of removal. "Mrs. Halloway?" a voice said behind me. I turned. It was one of the interns. Long dark braid, tablet in hand. Her name tag said, Angeli. "I just wanted to say," she hesitated, glancing back at the table. "I thought you were really sweet when I first met you, back when we had that kickoff dinner. You brought those lemon bars?" I nodded. "That was 3 years ago." "I know," she said quickly. I noticed your name wasn't mentioned. I thought maybe that was weird." "Weird?" I smiled, barely. "Thanks for saying something." She bit her lip. "Maybe it was just a mistake." Maybe. Or maybe someone practiced that letter enough times to make sure it wasn't. She looked like she wanted to say more, but then someone called her name. She gave me a quick nod and walked off, the tablet tucked to her chest like a shield. I set the glass down. It left a perfect ring on the white plastic tablecloth. Then I walked out. Not stormed, just walked. Out into the Texas heat where the evening air still carried the humidity of a too long spring. The parking lot buzzed with cicadas. My car door groaned. Inside, I sat for a moment, letting the AC hum and my heart slow back down to something that didn't feel like evidence gathering. I opened the photo I'd taken. The letter was just blurry enough not to read, but the podium plaque was sharp, and the date stamp, clear. I emailed it to myself. Then I added a note, cross-reference printed program. Back home, I opened his laptop. We still shared the same wireless network password, the same laundry basket, the same Netflix account. But the password to his company folder, that had changed. So had the lock screen on his phone, and the credit card he used to buy new luggage. I'd noticed it last week, the monogram tag reading R. Halloway on a brand new Toomey bag, even though we hadn't taken a trip together in over a year. I went to my desk, opened a drawer, pulled out the invitation. "Please join us for a farewell reception in honor of Ronald Halloway. May 4th, 5 p.m., Executive Lounge." No +1 listed, no RSVP line, no mention of me. 3 days later, I walked into the receptionist alcove at his old building, pretending to drop off a goodbye card. She smiled politely. "Ron's lucky," I said. "Not everyone gets such a beautiful send-off." She rolled her eyes. His secretary practically coordinated the whole thing. Honestly, HR just let her run wild. Even picked the playlist. That Seda mix was hers. I kept my face blank. Wow, she's thorough, she laughed. You should have seen her in the break room the night before. Had like 6 different drafts of his speech. I almost offered to edit. My throat tightened. 6 drafts? She winked. Perfectionist. I thanked her and left, gripping the edge of the elevator button just a little too hard. Back in my car, I opened my notes app and typed, "Check for letter versions, printer history." Then I wrote something that surprised me. What else has been rewritten? The hum of the AC turned to a low roar as the car idled. My reflection hovered in the rearview mirror, faded lipstick, hair frizzed from the humidity, a woman who looked more like an observer than a wife. The kind of person people forgot was there until the photo album proved it. I scrolled through old pictures, searching for the last time my name appeared anywhere near his professional life. Conference dinners, company picnics, holiday parties. There I was in one from 2019, his arm around me, the same secretary standing a few feet away holding a tray of cupcakes. Her smile, polite, demure, looked ordinary then, the kind of smile that doesn't threaten anyone until it does. The next photo, from the following year, had been cropped tighter, my shoulder gone, my drink glass still visible at the edge. It wasn't just removal, it was redirection. Every public frame had been edited, every digital trace sanitized. That realization didn't sting, it crystallized. I had lived through neglect before, but this was archival neglect, intentional omission disguised as corporate tidiness. That night, when Ron came home, I was still awake. He kicked off his shoes near the door, dropped his jacket on the couch. "Long night," he said, not looking at me. His voice was cheerful, the artificial kind reserved for answering machines and small talk. "How'd it go?" I asked. He paused just long enough for me to know he'd expected me to already know. "Fine. Emotional." "Must have been," I said, eyes still on the TV. A rerun hummed in the background. He opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and leaned against the counter like he was waiting for the day to dissolve. "They said a few nice things," he added, shrugging. "It was good closure." "Closure," I repeated. The word landed in the air like a dropped coin, small, metallic, final. He didn't notice. "I might help with the transition a bit next week," he said, scratching his temple. "Consulting maybe, a few hours here and there." "With her?" I asked. He froze, the bottle halfway to his lips. "What?" "Your secretary." His eyebrows lifted, then lowered. "She's not my secretary anymore, Em. She just helped coordinate. HR asked her." 6 drafts, I said quietly. "What?" "Nothing." He squinted, maybe trying to gauge whether I was joking. I wasn't. He shrugged again, the universal gesture of dismissal, and disappeared down the hallway toward the shower. The sound of water filled the house. I sat there, the condensation ring from his beer forming next to my untouched tea. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and soap, his aftershave drifting through the air. I thought about the slides again, the missing photos, the polished edits. I picked up my phone and opened the email I'd sent myself. The photo of the podium, the blurry letter, the timestamp. It glowed in the dark like a secret with edges. Cross-reference printed program. The note blinked at me. So I did. The next morning, I called the office pretending to be from facilities. I'd done admin work once. I knew the lingo. "Hi," I said brightly. "I'm following up on last week's farewell event for Mr. Halloway. We're updating documentation for the photo archive. Could I get a digital copy of the printed program?" The woman on the other end sounded distracted. "Sure, give me an email." I gave her one, an old Gmail I'd created for recipe newsletters. An hour later, the file came through, a 2-page PDF. I printed it, spread it across the kitchen counter like an autopsy report. There it was. His name in bold, the company logo in blue. Under closing remarks, it said, "Presented by Ms. Allison Grant Her." The bottom corner listed draft approved by R. Halloway. Approved, not written by. I took another photo, then another. Then I added both to a folder I'd titled Curation. That night, he came home late again. The shower ran longer. The cologne was different, a woodier scent, new, confident, not the one I'd picked out years ago. He talked about consulting again, about mentorship opportunities, about how freeing it felt to move on. I listened, and I recorded every word, because what he didn't realize was that omission leaves fingerprints too. Digital, verbal, emotional. You can track the absence of someone almost as clearly as their presence. When he fell asleep, I checked his briefcase. Empty except for a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop. It needed a password, but the folder name read Legacy Materials. And legacy, I realized, is just another word for story. His story. One he'd started rewriting without me, and one I intended to finish. I woke up before the sun the next morning, long before the alarm or the hum of the coffee maker. The house was still, quiet in the way that used to feel comforting before silence became evidence. Dust floated in the pale light leaking through the blinds. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the cursor blinking like a metronome of suspicion. The question I typed last night still glared at me. What else has been rewritten? I clicked through old folders, taxes, vacations, house repairs, before finally landing on the shared drive we'd once used for family documents. It was nearly empty now. Just one folder left, photos. Inside, only 5 images remained, all cropped tight, all missing me. The corporate slideshow hadn't been an accident. It was the culmination of months of slow deletion. I scrolled back through the folder history. A few timestamps caught my eye, recent edits, all within the last month, each tagged with his username, R. Halloway, admin. He'd been curating even our shared life. I opened another window and searched how to recover deleted files from a synced drive. A tech forum suggested checking version history. I followed the steps, heart pounding like I was diffusing something volatile, and there they were, earlier drafts, faint ghosts in the digital record, hundreds of photos, me laughing at a picnic, me standing beside him in front of the company banner, me holding the ribbon at a charity race, all tagged deleted by user. Our Halloway/admin, my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't negligence, it was precision. A slow erasure that had started long before the farewell speech. I printed the deletion log. The sound of the printer filled the kitchen like static. Then I opened his email. He'd changed his password there too, but our accounts were still linked through an old autofill. It let me peek at the subject lines of his recent messages, just enough to see patterns. RE. Farewell draft V5. Speech tone adjustment. Per HR final copy attached. My pulse climbed. I clicked forgot password, used our shared recovery phone number, and a minute later, I was in. The inbox looked innocent at first. Shipping confirmations, newsletters, automated corporate bulletins. But when I filtered by attachments, the real archive appeared. 6 versions of the farewell letter, all labeled sequentially. Each sent from his secretary, Allison Grant, to his account. The first one began, "Dear friends and colleagues, I want to thank you and my incredible wife, Emily. By version 3, my name was replaced with my supportive family. By version 5, even the word family was gone. Version 6, the final, matched what she'd read aloud. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. Each revision was timestamped, each reply polite. Looks great, Allison. Small tweak, maybe less personal tone. Perfect, print and bring to event." He hadn't just allowed the omission, he'd directed it. My phone buzzed beside me. A text from him. "Running late this morning. Grab dinner tonight?" Dinner. Like nothing had shifted. I stared at the message until it dimmed out, then I opened notes again and typed, "Retrieve printer logs, cross-check timestamps with sent emails. Find out where physical drafts printed. Because words might lie, but ink rarely does." That afternoon, I drove to his office under the pretense of dropping off his old mug, the one with the chipped handle and the faded #1 mentor lettering. It felt like carrying a relic from another life. The building's lobby smelled of disinfectant and lemon. The same receptionist from before looked up from her screen and smiled. "Back again?" "Just returning something of his," I said. "He left a mug in the car." "Ah, that's sweet," she said. "You can leave it in the break room." The elevator doors opened with a muted ding. Inside, my reflection floated across mirrored walls. The ride up felt longer than I remembered. His office door was half open. Inside, the desk was already cleared. Only the faint imprint of paper clips on the blotter remained. The printer sat by the window, its power light blinking softly. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. On his desk, a USB sat half inserted into the port. I checked the contents, scanned PDFs labeled by date. One stood out, farewell speech, drafts.zip. The sound of footsteps in the hall froze me. I pulled the drive, slipped it into my purse, and turned toward the window, pretending to admire the skyline as the door opened. Allison? She stood in the doorway, holding a stack of folders. Her hair was tied back this time, her tone light but wary. Emily, I didn't realize you'd be here. I was just dropping something off, I said, gesturing vaguely toward the desk. Ron left a few things behind. Right, she said, stepping inside. Her perfume was subtle, cedar and vanilla. He's been meaning to clear the rest. Her eyes flicked toward the empty mug I'd placed near the printer. You didn't have to come all the way up. I wanted to, I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the printer filled the silence. You organized that farewell, didn't you? I asked. She smiled modestly. Just helped a bit. 6 drafts of a letter seems like more than a bit. That made her pause. A small muscle in her cheek twitched. I'm thorough, she said finally. I noticed. Her gaze sharpened slightly, as if calculating how much I knew. You and Ron must be proud, she said. He left quite a legacy here. Legacy, I repeated. That's one word for it. She tilted her head. Everything all right, Mrs. Holloway? Perfect, I said softly. I'm just making sure his story's accurate. Her eyes narrowed the tiniest fraction, then she smiled, the professional kind that seals off all entry points, and walked out. When the door closed, I let out the breath I'd been holding. I plugged the USB back into my laptop in the car. The files were there, not just drafts, but tracked changes, highlighted comments, notes in the margins. Remove Emily, too personal. Replace we with I. Simplify emotional tone, focus on career. Each note initialed AG. Each approval signed RH. The edits weren't about polishing, they were about purging. That night, I backed everything up to a private drive and printed copies for my attorney friend Sarah, who owed me a favor. I didn't tell her details yet, just that I needed to know if removing someone from a written record could qualify as professional misconduct under company documentation laws. She said she'd look into it. I spent the rest of the evening in the kitchen, watching the printer feed sheet after sheet of paper, drafts, logs, timestamps, annotations. The pages stacked like layers of intent. By midnight, my dining table looked like an evidence board without pins. The air smelled of toner and burnt dust. On one page, Allison's final note read, "Approved for print, confidentiality maintained." Confidentiality. The word rolled around in my head like a code I hadn't yet cracked. Because who exactly were they trying to keep things confidential from? Me or the company? Either way, the story had already been rewritten, and I had just printed the first draft of my correction. I stopped reacting. That was the first step. No more calling him out mid-lie. No more demanding explanations that would only feed the performance. I let him talk, spin, justify. I smiled when he asked if I could help pack the rest of his office things. I even nodded when he joked that HR's probably relieved I'm gone. Every response from me was mild, unthreatening, disinterested. That's how predators underestimate you. They confuse quiet with surrender, and it's how I gained access to his cloud storage without raising suspicion. It started on a Tuesday morning, one of those gray, lukewarm Texas mornings that can't decide if it's spring or the leftover edge of winter. He was halfway out the door, phone wedged between shoulder and ear, mumbling about final invoices and consulting contracts. The smell of his cologne lingered long after the door shut, that same new, woodier scent I hadn't bought. When I went to pour coffee, I saw it. His tablet, screen still lit, face down on the counter. His home screen wallpaper was a mountain lake we'd never been to. He'd changed even that. I didn't go looking for anything at first. Habit just took over. The way you glance at a clock even when you know the time. I swiped it open expecting email or news headlines, but muscle memory made my thumb tap the Google Drive icon. And there it was, a folder labeled Offboard 2025. Inside, dozens of documents, PowerPoint decks, receipts, a travel log. Half a dozen subfolders labeled Handover, Strategy, Farewell Assets. Each name felt sterile, like it had been scrubbed clean of sentiment. Then one caught my eye, a file titled Potential Gifts. It sounded harmless, thoughtful even. The kind of spreadsheet you'd make for a company farewell, names, contributions, acknowledgements. I opened it. A grid of cells stretched across the screen, each one meticulous. Gift, cost, contributor, acknowledgement. Someone had color-coded them. Pale yellow for team leads, blue for executives, pink for admin staff. I scrolled until I saw the section labeled Personal Thanks, Karen. Mentor, team leads, ops Emily, wife, cell left blank. The cursor blinked beside my empty box like it was waiting for permission to matter. I didn't screenshot it. I downloaded the file. Then I checked the version history, a quiet instinct I'd honed from years of bookkeeping and watching people pretend to forget. 6 days before the event, my name had been there. A simple line. To my wife, Emily, thank you for your years of support. 3 days before the event, the cell went blank. The edit marked, modified by user cakegran@northmartech.com, Karen. I stared at the blinking cursor, not moving, not crying, just watching how quickly a life can be erased with one keystroke. That's how easy it is. For them, I whispered. My voice sounded flat in the empty kitchen, but if deletion could happen quietly, so could restoration. So I started building the trail. First, I exported every version of the spreadsheet, one by one, saving them with timestamps and user IDs intact. The file names lined up like a timeline of betrayal. V1, V2, V3 show final, V4 IHR, V5/approved. Next, I ran a metadata extractor, color-coding the edits by user. Red for her, blue for him. My name flashed red every time it disappeared, like a wound reopening. Then I pulled up the farewell letter she'd printed for the event and overlaid the two files. The pattern was perfect. Each edit in her spreadsheet corresponded to a line removed from the speech. It wasn't negligence, it was choreography. And I wasn't just angry anymore. I was curious, because someone had gone to a lot of effort to make my absence look natural. I needed corroboration, a human voice to echo what the data already screamed. So I called Samir. He'd been one of Ron's favorite junior managers back when our marriage still had casual dinner parties and shared jokes over burnt ribs. Samir used to text Ron his fantasy football picks, show up early to barbecues, bring his girlfriend, and help me carry folding chairs from the garage. I remembered something he'd once said during a Christmas party, when the company still felt like an extension of our home. He'd laughed, drink in hand, and told me, if I ever leave this place, it'll be because it stopped feeling like yours and his. You two made it human. Now it was neither ours nor human. I texted him, need a quick coffee, work-related, confidential. He replied almost instantly, tomorrow, Frisco, 9 a.m. The next morning, the cafe smelled like roasted beans and quiet guilt. It was one of those suburban coffee shops built into a strip mall, half barista counter, half therapy room. He was already there when I walked in, seated by the window, tapping his phone. He looked older, less polished, his suit creased from the commute. He smiled when he saw me, that hesitant kind that hides more questions than warmth. Emily, he said, standing halfway before sitting again. It's been a while. 2 years, I said, sliding into the chair across from him. Christmas party, remember? You brought Marissa. His face tightened. We broke up. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Company kind of killed that one too. We made small talk about layoffs, about management changes, until it became unbearable. Then I pulled a folded page from my folder and placed it on the table. It was a printout of the farewell letter. The original version. The one that still had my name. He leaned forward, scanning the words, his brow furrowed. This isn't the version I heard. You remember? I asked quietly. Yeah. He frowned, rubbing his temple. The one she read didn't mention you. I thought it was weird. Figured maybe you two were going through something private. We are now. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning like a bruise. Is this about Karen? He asked. I didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch long enough for the truth to fill it. He sighed. People talk, Emily. She's been working late with him for months. HR said it was for offboarding logistics, but come on. Ron doesn't need help planning a slide deck. The bitterness in his voice surprised me. I slid a small USB drive across the table. Then maybe you'll understand what's on this. He turned it in his hand. What's this? The proof, I said. But I don't need gossip. I need verification. He looked at me carefully. You're not trying to expose? I cut in. Not yet. Just confirm. You were in the room. You heard the letter. If HR or legal asks, you can confirm which version was read aloud. He hesitated. The waitress passed, refilling his cup. He watched her go before saying, I won't lie for him. That's all I need. He pocketed the drive, and I stood. As I left, his reflection in the glass looked smaller than I remembered, like loyalty had a weight he'd just decided to set down. Outside, the Texas sun had burned off the morning chill. I walked to my car with a list in my head, each item etched sharp as evidence. Metadata trail, complete. Primary witness, secured. Document versions, backed up. Motive, suggestive but not yet confirmed. What I needed now was a trigger, something public enough that denial would collapse under its own weight. I started checking the company's internal events calendar, still accessible through his old login. It was like peering through a window he thought I couldn't reach. Meetings, lunches, outgoing notes. And then I saw it. Knowledge transfer. Friday, 12 p.m. A casual lunch for the outgoing team to pass their wisdom to the new hires. No suits, no formality, just laughter, deli platters, and bragging rights. Ron would be there, so would Karen, and so would half the room that had clapped through my erasure. I RSVP'd through his old account. No one questioned it. That Friday, I dressed deliberately. Slate gray blazer, navy slacks, no wedding ring, neutral lipstick. I tied my hair back the way I used to before interviews. Controlled, symmetrical, unshakable. In my bag, a manila folder labeled follow-up notes. Inside, every printout, every timestamp, every file. At the back, one more document. A notarized affidavit of authorship from a document consultant named Olivia had recommended. He'd reviewed the files and confirmed tampering under oath. It was legally airtight. When I arrived, the conference room buzzed with the sound of small talk and clinking soda cans. The air smelled of onions and printer toner. The younger employees laughed in clusters, oblivious. Then someone saw me, and then the noise dimmed by half. Karen was at the whiteboard, scribbling bullet points with a green marker. Her posture stiffened when she turned and saw me. Emily, she said, I didn't realize. I'm just here to tie up loose ends, I said smoothly, sliding into an empty chair across from her. Ron looked up from the catering tray. His jaw twitched. You weren't invited. Neither was the erasure, I said lightly, but here we are. He glanced around at the team, trying to read the room. Let's not make a scene. Why not? I said. Seems to be the theme. I waited until everyone had sandwiches in hand, the usual office hum returning. Then I reached into my folder, pulled out the printed farewell draft, the one with my name still intact, and placed it in the center of the table, between the veggie platter and the whiteboard markers. Before we eat, I said calmly, I wanted to thank everyone who supported Ron during his years here. It's been illuminating to see how the story's been told. Karen's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering against the table. And I thought, I continued, it might be nice to read the original letter, the one he actually wrote. Ron stood, the color draining from his face. Emily, this isn't appropriate. I looked up, steady. You're right, it's overdue. I began to read, not loud, not theatrical, just steady, each word deliberate. To my wife, Emily. Thank you for holding down the fort through every late night, every deadline, every missed dinner. I looked at Karen halfway through the sentence. Her throat tightened. Funny, I said softly, how a single deletion can rewrite a history. The silence that followed had texture, thick, uneven, like the air before a storm. Samir, sitting near the back, cleared his throat. That's the version I remember, he said. He was working on it right before the edits. Karen flushed crimson. Ron sank back into his chair. The projector flickered behind them, looping through a slideshow of smiling faces, his legacy on repeat. But this time, the story was mine to finish. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just closed the folder, gathered my papers, and stood. The document spoke louder than I ever could, and for the first time, he had no script left to hide behind. After the lunch meeting, no one said much. They didn't need to. That kind of silence doesn't happen when something's innocent. It only spreads like that when everyone realizes all at once that they've been sitting inside a lie, and someone just opened a window. I left the building without looking back. Walked past the receptionist, past the security desk, past the framed Employee of the Month portraits on the wall, some of which still had Ron's grin frozen in the glossy laminate. Each smile looked wrong now, like it belonged to an actor, playing a man he'd once been. A ghost with good posture. By the time I reached the lobby, my heels echoed against tile that felt too bright, too clean, the kind of sterile shine offices polish into their floors to hide what gets buried there. Outside, the heat wrapped around me like foil. The air smelled of asphalt and overworked engines. I crossed the parking lot, my reflection flickering in car windows as if the world wasn't sure which version of me to keep. By the time I got home, the missed calls had started. One, then another, then a text. Ron, what the hell are you doing? I didn't answer. He called again. I watched the screen light up on the counter, vibrating against the wood. I let it ring until his voice hit voicemail, his tone already sharp, already practiced. I turned the phone face down and went back to the sink. The hum of the fridge filled the silence. 2 hours later, a new email appeared. Subject line, HR request, review of farewell materials. I opened it. The body was sterile, corporate legalese dressed as courtesy. We are launching a limited internal review to ensure procedural consistency and verify archival integrity. I knew what that meant. Someone was scrambling to sanitize the mess, or bury it deeper. That night, I poured a glass of wine and lit one candle, just one, by the kitchen sink. The soft flame flickered against the steel faucet, catching the edges of the folder I'd carried for weeks. The same folder that had lived in my passenger seat, then in my briefcase, then under my pillow on nights when I couldn't sleep. Inside, I clipped the HR email to the farewell draft, added a sticky note with 3 words. Now they're listening. The sound of the pen scratching those letters felt steadier than my heartbeat. The next morning, my attorney called. Sarah's voice was calm, measured, but there was a tightness underneath, like a violin string tuned just short of snapping. They know you have documentation, she said. They're not going to challenge the content. They'll pivot, say it was a clerical oversight, maybe blame formatting. Except I have version history, I said, pacing the living room. My bare feet left faint marks in the carpet pile. Timestamps, edits, user IDs? Exactly, she said, which is why I think we take this higher. Not HR, board level. I paused by the window. Outside, a mockingbird hopped along the fence, chirping like nothing in the world could go wrong. You really think it's worth going that far? Emily, she said, voice softening. They erased your name from a document meant to define your husband's legacy at a company you helped build. If you stay quiet now, that version becomes fact. And facts have long memories. Her words landed like a gavel. The next morning, we sent the board packet, digitally and hard copy. Notarized, certified mail. I printed the cover letter myself, watching the ink glide across the page like a signature to my own resurrection. The packet included everything. The draft revisions, the spreadsheet edits, the farewell photos, the witness affidavit, even the metadata charts I'd color-coded like battle maps. It was all there. Proof that absence isn't silence. It's removal. By mid-afternoon, Ron came home. I heard the front door open, the old hinge giving its familiar groan. The sound of his keys hitting the ceramic dish by the door followed. The same dish we'd bought at a flea market in Asheville 15 years ago, the one with tiny chips along the rim from every move we'd survived together. He didn't call out. I stayed in the living room, cross-legged on the couch, the candle stub from last night still cold in its holder. He walked in, tie loose, jaw tight, the kind of angry that hides behind control. Ron, you embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. Me, I presented facts. Ron, you ambushed us. Me, I gave you 10 days to come clean. You used them to rewrite history. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like quiet could make it truer. Ron, it was just a letter. No one even noticed. I stood up slowly, meeting his eyes. Me. They noticed. He didn't answer. Me. Karen noticed when I showed her the version with my name still there. Samir noticed. He remembered hearing it before she deleted it. HR noticed when I dropped the packet off, and the board will notice when they see the metadata. The silence between us was brittle, The only sound was the ceiling fan ticking like a clock we'd run out of time on. He ran a hand down his face, eyes tired but calculating. Ron, this isn't what it looks like. Me, then tell me what it looks like. He didn't. Not because he didn't have a lie, because he didn't have one that worked on me anymore. Finally, quieter. Ron, it was never supposed to go that far. Me, it did. He blinked, looked away, then muttered something about needing space. That night he slept in the guest room. The door stayed shut, and I let it. 3 days later, a company-wide memo went out. It didn't use names, of course. It never does. Just phrases like corrective clarification and recirculated version of farewell materials to ensure inclusion of all contributors. Corporate language for "we got caught." The memo was signed by the VP of Operations, the same man who'd clapped hardest during the first farewell speech. Their word for my erasure was the Oversight, but it was enough. It meant the lie didn't win. Still, I wasn't done, because in that same folder of board communications, buried beneath routine budget reports, I found something else, a single line item in a transition expense sheet. $5,000. Farewell coordination services. Attached vendor, K. Grant Consulting. Karen had invoiced the company. She hadn't just written the letter, she'd billed them for it. I scrolled further down, heart thudding slower now, heavier. The address listed on the invoice wasn't corporate. It was a private P.O. box. One I recognized, because I'd seen it before. On a hidden credit card statement tied to Ron's business expenses. The same one I'd almost ignored a month ago when I saw payments to subscription logistics and courier services. She hadn't done it for him. She'd done it with him. Together. I forwarded the discovery to Sarah that night. No commentary, no dramatics, just the scanned document and a single line in the body. You were right, it wasn't just personal. She called within 10 minutes. This changes everything, she said. If you routed company funds for personal use and erased your name to hide joint financial stakes, that's not just misconduct, that's fraud. Will it stick? I asked. It will echo, she said. That's sometimes better. Her confidence steadied me more than the wine ever could. By Monday, the paperwork was ready. Not for divorce, not yet. For financial partition. A quiet wall drawn through our accounts, protecting what was mine before he could reroute another cent. It wasn't vengeance, it was containment. He found the documents on the kitchen table that evening, laid neatly beside his untouched dinner. He didn't touch them for hours, just stood in the doorway, staring at his own name in black ink. The house felt smaller with him in it, the air thick, unbreathable. When he finally sat, he traced the edges of the papers with one finger like he was reading Braille. His hand hovered over the signature line. Ron. So this is it? Me. This is the first part. He looked up, eyes dark, searching for some piece of the woman who used to laugh at his bad jokes. Ron. And the second? Me. That depends on whether you keep pretending you didn't try to erase me. He stared for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, small, resigned, and signed. No apology, just ink. The next day, an email from corporate appeared in my inbox. Subject: Board confirmation. Farewell archive revision. The message was brief. The board has approved the revised farewell acknowledgement document. Archive copy updated. That's how companies say, sorry. No flowers, no calls. Just metadata adjusted, PDF replaced. But it was enough. It meant I existed again, not just in memory, but in record. 3 weeks after the letter was corrected, the secretary resigned. No fanfare, no send-off, no farewell lunch with balloons or sheet cake or awkward hugs near the conference room door. Just a quiet departure notice on the company Slack, time-stamped 7:12 a.m. Karen Martinez will be moving on to pursue new opportunities. We wish her all the best. They always say that. The thread filled with polite reactions, a few thumbs-up emojis, one heart, and a single, "We'll miss you," from HR. But no one actually said her name aloud that day. Not in meetings, not over lunch. In corporate spaces, silence travels faster than gossip. People know when not to touch something that still smells like smoke. The company sent Ron a follow-up thank you gift later that week. A crystal plaque engraved with a quote about leadership. Great leaders build legacies that last. It arrived in a velvet box, wrapped in tissue and company ribbon, the kind that tries too hard to feel thoughtful. He left it on the dining chair, unopened, half in shadow. I stood there for a full minute, staring at it, tracing the reflection of my own face on its polished edge. The small folded card inside caught the light. The words, "Thank you for your service" to North Martech printed in blue serif font. My name was missing. Again. Not even the generic "to you and your family." It wasn't an oversight, it was muscle memory, the final echo of erasure from a system that had learned how to look grateful while quietly cutting you out. That night, I made a choice. I opened the hallway closet and knelt before the fireproof safe, the one we'd bought after the 2010 hailstorm, when we thought security came from locks instead of honesty. The metal was cold under my hands. The sound of the combination wheel clicking open was sharper than I remembered, like punctuation. Inside were the documents I'd kept through every move and merger of our marriage, the deed to the house, joint account forms, tax returns, even the old title of the Honda he sold without asking. At the back was an envelope labeled in my handwriting, "Title and Property." I slid it out, sat cross-legged on the hallway floor with a pen and the petition for separation of assets. I didn't fill it out in anger. I filled it out the way you'd rebuild a fence after a storm, not as punishment, but as boundary. When he came downstairs the next morning, I was already dressed, coffee in hand, hair tied back, steady. He stopped halfway down the steps, taking in the paper spread neatly across the kitchen table. I didn't speak. I just handed him the form. He read it slowly, eyes scanning each paragraph like he was searching for a loophole, some clause that made it reversible. His lips parted once, then closed again. There wasn't one. Ron, you really want to divide everything over speech? Me. No. I want to divide everything because you didn't. He blinked. Me. You didn't divide the guilt. You didn't divide the spotlight. You didn't divide the thanks. You built a whole goodbye without me in it. Now I'm just returning the favor. He sat, hands pressed flat to his thighs like he didn't trust them not to shake. Ron. It wasn't about you. Me. That's exactly the problem. He exhaled, slow, defeated, and looked away, jaw tightening around whatever apology he couldn't form. That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office in Denton, Texas. The building was older than it looked from the outside. Beige tile floors, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly, posters about marriage licenses curling on the edges of corkboards. I waited in line behind a woman trying to notarize a birthday card for her niece in Michigan. She had glitter on her sweater and kept apologizing for not bringing the right ID. The clerk looked tired, the kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. And the air smelled like toner and the synthetic pine of the janitor's cart. When it was my turn, I slid the documents forward. The clerk read the top line, glanced at me once, and nodded. She stamped them. The sound echoed louder than I expected. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry either. I just felt settled. Like something inside me had finally stopped pacing. By the time I got home, the house was half packed. Boxes lined the hallway, labeled with black marker in his handwriting. Office, tools, winter clothes, the closet doors were open. His side of the dresser drawers gaped like missing teeth. He'd already moved some of his things to a corporate apartment across town, the one his new consulting firm rented for temporary housing. I didn't ask for the address. I didn't ask about Karen either. She'd vanished so cleanly she might as well have been another line deleted from a document. 3 days later, I drove downtown to an office in Frisco, one of North Martech's competitors. Their logo glowed soft gold above the glass doors. I had a resume in my bag, references, and a portfolio of event coordination work I'd done on the side. The same work he used to call little projects. The lobby smelled of espresso and new carpet. The receptionist offered me water and a smile. Someone will be with you shortly. 10 minutes later, a woman stepped out. Late 40s, calm posture, smart navy suit. She introduced herself as Dana, head of client operations. We shook hands. She scanned my resume. Dana, you have strong organizational work here. North Martech, right? Me. Yes, I worked closely with their event team on logistics, outreach, and budget reconciliation. She hummed, reading further. Your name rings a bell. Me. I used to be married to Ron Halloway. Her brows lifted. Oh, the guy with that weird letter situation? We heard something about that. I didn't flinch. Me. Yes, that was me. She studied me for a moment, not with judgment, but curiosity, then smiled, small and sharp. Dana. We like women who pay attention to details. I smiled back. That's what I do best. I got the job. 2 weeks later, I was planning a client retreat in Kentucky. I spent my days organizing name badges, building itineraries, and double-checking printed programs with a fine-tip pen. Not because I was afraid of being erased again, because I knew exactly how to make sure no one else was. Every name was double verified. Every acknowledgement read aloud before printing. Every draft saved in 3 locations. Control wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about visibility. At night, I returned to my small rental townhouse, kicked off my heels, and sat by the window with tea instead of wine. The quiet wasn't hollow now. It was earned. I didn't replace him. I didn't need to. I bought a new coffee maker. Stainless steel, programmable, rearranged the furniture, donated the dining set we never used, repainted the office walls a pale sage green. When the paint dried, I hung one frame near the window. A printout of the farewell letter, the corrected version with my name underlined in red ink. It wasn't bitterness. It was proof of life. The paper rippled slightly under the glass from where the ink had bled into the fiber. In the last paragraph, clear and unambiguous, it read, "To my wife, Emily, thank you for holding down the fort while I built this dream. I couldn't have done it without you." The original version. The true version. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I'd sit with my coffee and stare at it while the sun climbed through the blinds, lighting the edges until the words looked etched in gold. That's all I'd ever wanted, really. Not applause, not extravagant gratitude, just to be seen, not as a supporting character, not as a silent witness, as someone who was there. And when that didn't happen, I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I didn't burn the house down or torch his career. I just wrote myself back into the story. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.